Hello, so today we're going to continue our discussion of the story, really, that Van de Waal is talking about in his book. And the story is what happened to countries in West Africa after the end of colonialism. What Van de Waal makes pretty clear is that the type of system, the political economy of the colonial era, many of the aspects of that carried over into the post-colonial era. And you had a group of elites who came to power in sub-Saharan African countries that basically perpetuated the colonial system to their own advantage, and created an extractive political and economic environment that really continues largely to this day, although it's been reformed and modified in many countries. And as you do your research for your final paper, you'll see that there's a pretty big disparity in terms of how countries are evolving and how countries are dealing with the challenges of globalization. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the role that foreign aid has played in all of this. As you recall from the reading, these neo-patrimonial systems, these systems that are controlled by elites, basically use foreign aid as a direct contribution to their national budgets. They use the aid really as a replacement for the types of assistance that the government itself should be providing to its people, but because they are unable to generate the type of surplus needed to make investments, to make social investments, to make investments in infrastructure, they're not really serving the interests of their people, and they both rely and depend on foreign aid, and they in fact in many cases manipulate the whole system. So what is foreign aid? Basically, it can be defined as the direct contribution of cash, goods, or services from one government to another, or from one or more international financial institutions to one or more countries. This can be done on a country-by-country basis. It can be done on a regional basis, but basically it's it's this sort of direct contribution. It can come in the form of a direct budgetary support. In other words, the money just flows into the budget of the receiving country. It can be given as no-strings humanitarian assistance. We see that in the case of famine, and in case of natural disasters, where basically the international community steps up and provides this kind of assistance without any strings. When we talked about the structural adjustment programs and the way that they were implemented in the 1980s and 1990s, we saw this as conditional aid, where the strings were attached, and the strings were very much concerned with things like improving governance and accountability, and also reducing the size of government in these countries. And then there's also specific project or program funding that occurs quite often. So money's earmarked for agricultural projects, for infrastructure projects, for social improvement projects. When we look at who gives this aid, normally it's given through specialized agencies like the U.S. Agency for International Development or United Kingdom's Department for International Development. These are agencies associated with the Foreign Service, the Foreign Office of these countries, and we typically call that bilateral aid. And this aid is often tied up with specific foreign policy objectives. Then you have the international financial institutions like the World Bank, the IMF, the African Development Bank, which are essentially places where foreign aid is consolidated from different sources, and these organizations make loans and provide technical assistance to the recipient countries. And then, of course, you have private foundations and NGOs such as the Gates Foundation, the Clinton Foundation, Carter Foundation, which provide direct grants, usually not to the government, but to civil society organizations in the recipient countries. And again, this is for very specific reasons. Gates is very interested in healthcare. Carter is very interested in promoting democracy. Clinton has a number of different interests, education, healthcare, and also promoting good governance. So why do they give this aid? Well, that's always a good question. I think it varies depending on which organization we're talking about. But if it's bilateral aid, they do it to advance their own regional policy objectives. U.S. government aid is in support of U.S. government policy objectives in Africa and Latin America, Asia, wherever. It could be given simply to relieve suffering. It's very hard for the world to look at something like like famine in any country, or the result of natural disasters, and not to step in and try to do something. We also try to stabilize the national political economies so that governments can at least keep a moderate level of control and stability for their population. They do it to provide technical assistance. In many developing countries, basic skills. In terms of how to promote agricultural projects, how to develop industry, how to run a banking system. All these things require a fairly high level of technical knowledge, and this foreign aid money is used to support that. It could also be to build administrative capacity within the government, so that you have a group of qualified and effective administrators. It can also be given to the people, to civil society organizations, in order to give voice to the voiceless, in order to allow them to speak the truth about their situation to the power structure that they're living under. It's also to establish multiple poles of power and influence, so that particularly in these neo-patrimonial systems, which Vandewalle talks about, that you kind of disperse power by giving civil society and giving different groups an ability to organize, an ability to state their case, and hopefully to break down the kind of autocratic or undemocratic systems that the people have to live with. So how has this foreign aid worked? Well, you have pros and cons, as with many things. And over the past 50 years, it has obviously helped millions of people receive nutritional and medical care that otherwise they wouldn't have. It's helped to stabilize the governments of numerous countries who otherwise might have collapsed. And it's also brought needed technical and managerial skills into countries that are incapable of providing their own, because they really don't have a functioning educational system. On the con side, of which there's an increasing amount of criticism of foreign aid, saying that it has fostered a culture of aid dependency, has promoted corruption, because aid is seen as something to be captured, that the elites in many countries view aid as an entitlement, and they find ways of funneling aid into private foundations and private organizations that really have no basis in terms of the social social improvement. You can also say that it's undermined rather than encouraged domestic economic development in many countries. I mean, obviously, if somebody views aid as an entitlement and something they're going to get on a continuous basis, why go through the difficulty of coming up with your own business ideas and putting them into play. So it can be a disincentive for economic development. It's also put an enormous managerial burden on receiving countries, because you have in many cases dozens of, if not scores of development agencies, all in a country looking to help, but they have to be organized and managed somehow, to focus them on what the real needs of the country are, and receiving governments, the host governments, often have a difficult time managing this, all of this well-intentioned aid, and it really does become a burden for governments to stay on top of all this. So in conclusion, we could say, unfortunately, the evidence supports both sides of this argument, both the pros and the cons. There are many efforts out there to improve aid, and we can only hope that that we can come up with a system that's based on that aid is directed towards the real needs of specific countries, and that the whole process of bringing aid in and managing the projects and monitoring the results are done in a fair and equitable manner, and that you create a virtuous circle of feedback, so that aid becomes a tool for good rather than evolving into the negative aspects which I just mentioned. So next week we'll discuss some of the ways that that aid recipients and aid donors can start working together. In fact, that's going to be the theme for the remaining third of the course. So thanks.